Sure. I'm Charles Derupe. I'm the Sales Tools and Content Manager at Square. I am part of a 5-person sales enablement team. And I have been at Square for almost 3 years now. So as we'll talk about later, have seen a lot of the hypergrowth that we've seen in the past 3 years.
Hi, folks. I'm Joe Hostetler. I'm the lead trainer for account management at Square. So that's our growth and retention team. I've actually been at Square since 2014. So I'm just like, oldest guy here pretty much. I'm the, again, by lead trainer, that means we have an onboarding manager. She reports to me, and I also lead all of our ongoing learning and coaching programs.
Awesome. I'm so excited and so appreciative to have you guys here, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have got to share with us. So first, why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit more about Square?
Sure. So Square was actually founded in 2009 by Jack Dorsey and Jim McKelvey. Our company purpose is economic empowerment. I think that purpose actually keeps a lot of us around. I think it's relevant, really to everyone who works at Square. Yes, while we're a financial services or fintech company, we're actually known for point of sale payments. Universal symbol, right, is this, the little white reader. But we do quite a bit more than that, and we'll show you what that looks like in a second. We're currently in 5 countries. So that's Australia, Japan, United States, Canada, UK. And of course, again, we started out as a little white reader, but I'll let Charles tell you a little bit more about what else we do.
For sure. And I just want to double down on the economic empowerment. We're going through some really interesting times today, and I'm so proud to work for Square, where that is really up in front right now and how we can help our customers. And so just wanted to have a little bit of pride for Square there.
Plus one.
Yeah, awesome. You definitely should.
Yeah. So we'll go. Yeah. So Rachel, if you are able to go to the next slide, we'll show you a little bit about the timeline of Square. As Joe mentioned, around 2009, during the last recession, we really started out with this Square white reader, but over the next decade, as you can see here, we really expanded all of the products that we have. And of course, these products continue to evolve over time. At this time, we were using a different knowledge-based system, and around late 2016, early 2017, that's when we implemented Guru. And as you can see towards the right, we even had much bigger launches there. And so as we go into this idea of the perfect storm, you're taking a look at all of these different types of products that our salespeople and account management teams have to learn about. So we would love to know, I'm sure that Rachel will pull this up later, like, how about your teams, right? Like what product lines do you have? How many products do you have? I'm sorry, Chandler, if I stole that.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, we're going to send out a poll over here that you guys should see coming through. Looking at this slide, I'm feeling kind of lucky that Guru right now has 1 product that we have to master, but I'm really curious to see what everybody else has got. So if you guys go ahead and go to the poll and then vote, we can see in real time some of these responses coming through.
And we'd love to speak on, in terms of where you are. Joe and myself have seen the way that these products have evolved. And if you have a product that also evolves multiple times, then this is the webinar for you, because we've got a lot going on for you.
We sure do. Let's see, we got votes for 1 product, 2 to 5. Charles and Joe, are you guys voting for 6 to 20 or 20 plus? I can't tell how many are on that slide.
6 to 20.
I'm just going to 20 plus. Only because I know there's going to be so much more after this. Like, I am not convinced that, as we grow as a company, we know that so much more is for us in terms for evolution, and we're just going to continue to figure out how knowledge is going to help with that.
Yeah, so it looks like we've got 56% of the voters with just 1 product, and then 22% with 2 to 5 products, and then you two are the outliers with the 6 and over. So that's really awesome that we all get to learn from you guys who have gone through this hyper growth. You've scaled all these different product lines. So I'm really excited to see what we can learn from you guys today. So why don't we dive into your first challenge of this perfect storm concept?
Great. So we'd love to talk a little bit about the wide and deep knowledge here at Square. A lot of our functions when it comes to selling and retaining, they all have to know every single one of our products. Not only do they have to know each one of these products, we also have partners. We also have vendors that we are using that they need to be aware of for third-party solutions that Square cannot solve. So let's take a look at a little bit of what this Teams at Square looks like. This is a really funny slide because from our comms team, we have been advised not to give specific numbers. So we're going to go with something a little bit fun. For sales, we are simply the largest team here. Again, sales really needs to know a lot about a lot. The same thing goes for our account management team, who is next. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference in their functions. Next is going to be our payroll sales team. So we call them the next largest because they're sales function, but the least largest is partnerships, although we do have a lot of viewers using our knowledge base through the partnerships team, and also a lot of contributors of content there, which we'll talk a little bit about later. So let's take a look. Let's revisit back on that timeline and all of the different products that we have. As you can see here, and I feel like I'm going to be a broken record, but before 2020, all of these products launched. And when we're talking about the perfect storm, you're talking about not just the number of products that you have, but catching up all of these products and keeping them updated, which I'm sure a lot of you have some challenges. Even if you have a smaller product, it's really important to understand what knowledge do each one of the roles in your teams need to know. And there's a delineation between what each of the roles need to know uniquely and which ones they need to know shared across all of them. So, with one of the biggest issues and challenges that you can find when it comes to deep and wide knowledge is that you're going to duplicate a lot of information. And with that duplication comes with a lot of lack of updating and lack of verification and basically, just lack of rules and guidelines, which you will, I promise you, at some point need to create. So let's go a little bit about, to mitigate all of these problems, we want to show you some things that you need to look for and some things that you really need to set up if you have your own knowledge base today. So the first one is going to be roles and permissioning. And what that means, again, let's bring it back to the idea of what is unique information that your specific roles need to have and what is shared information that needs to be across all of them. The reason why we bring up roles and permissioning is that with roles, especially if they have multiple uses for your knowledge base, what that means is, are they just a viewer? Are they just a contributor? Are they just a sharer of this information or administrator? Some of those users will have one across all three of those. For example, Joe and I, who administrate our Guru instance, we had to have every single one of those. But there are some folks who are just contributors, just viewers. Again, you can mix and match that for all the permeations that you have. But what this means is that if you have that permissioning, you are able to then make your knowledge relevant for your audience, right? If you have the same information for different teams where 90% of that information is basically the same, you're going to want to explore whether that is a card or an article that is shared across these different teams, right? To make it easier, not just on your sales and account management and CS teams, et cetera, to see the right relevant knowledge for them, but also to lessen the amount of verifiers and contributors that you need to have. Great segue to the next point, which is frequent verification. So of course, and this is a given, right? You want to keep your content fresh and updated by subject matter experts. The hard part about this is understanding who are actually your subject matter experts, and who in your organizations can have the buy-in to think about why should they be contributing this knowledge. And when you know the why, that is going to be how they will frequently verify this information. But on the other side of that too, you want to have functionality that makes it that you surface these pieces of information when you need them verified. So think about intervals of when they need to be verified. Think about, again, are there groups of people that need to contribute and verify this information, going back to roles and permissioning, and who within those need to be alerted once verified. The last point here is extremely important, which is just-in-time knowledge. A lot of growing companies take a look at their knowledge bases from the viewpoint of someone who is an administrator. Let's keep this as easy as possible and as clean as possible for hierarchy. But I challenge you to step back and think about the viewpoint of your reps and your team members who need to know this information. If you are a sales rep, if you're a customer success manager, you know you have to have that answer at that right time. So you need to think about accessibility of that information, and also think about the future of how you can push information just when they need it. So there's this really awesome, and this is not a sale for Guru, but there's this really awesome feature that I have not seen for other knowledge management systems, which is something called knowledge triggers, where you can go to a specific platform, whether that's Salesforce, whether that's Gmail, where it can scrub a specific type of action or a specific type of text, and then say, if you read this text, push this card, which is honestly amazing. We're still working at this, by the way. Like this is like not socialized to our teams yet, but I'm just geeking out over it as a knowledge manager, and I'm sure Joe is too. Yeah, so we'll go on to our next slide. That's just a little bit about things that you need to think about when you have wide and deep knowledge, which I'm hoping a lot of you do as you evolve your products.
Yeah, something I wanted to, if we could just go back for one sec, actually, Rachel, I wanted to double click on was you talked about the different types of knowledge you need for different teams. So I know that you both, Charles, you enable the sales team, and Joe, you enable the account management team. So I was wondering how you think about the knowledge that both of those teams need, and what that breakdown kind of looks like at Square.
Yeah, Joe, you want to start with the account management team?
Sure. Yeah, to be clear, account management, again, I said growth and retention. So our team does not speak to any customer that does not already have a Square account. And so we don't sell the Square point of sale, for example. We need to know its functionalities and how it works, of course, because we help service questions and things like that. But we don't actually sell that product. When it comes to payments, we also don't sell our payments product that's embedded in point of sale. Although we do have to kind of resell it to folks whenever we're in a retention conversation. And I would also say sales, it just leverages far more marketing materials and content like that, because they're having to convince folks to move platforms over to Square. Whereas, we're just cross-selling, the many products on that slide that you just saw, and, making sure folks stay with us. What do you want to add to that, Charles?
Yeah, sales is on the other side of that coin, meaning that we need to know that product, but we need to know it quickly. So for us, time is of the essence, and you lose a sale by not having that information right away and not having the accurate information right away. So accessibility and cleanliness of our instance is extremely important. But also we take a look at subjects like objection handling, different sales plays, again, as Joe said, different external materials that we need to send out. Some of those can be shared, right? Objection handling can be shared somewhat with account management. External materials, while it is used by Square, you never know who's going to, by sales, you never know who's going to use it. So different functions need different pieces of information.
Yeah, I think we think about it the same way at Guru. We have, different knowledge for our sales team and account management team, and obviously they can mix and match as they please. But you're right. I think the way you talk about knowledge, knowing your audience being account management or sales, is different. So We actually have a poll up over here if anybody else wants to weigh in on how they think about that. I'd love to know if people differentiate between what their account managers get, sort of like the post-sales knowledge versus the pre-sales knowledge. Looks like we're all on the same page over here so far. We've got 3 votes for different knowledge for post-sales versus pre-sales. Let's give that another second if anybody else wants to go ahead and vote in the poll section.
Yeah, in this, I really want to reiterate, how are you thinking about deduplication of content when it's shared information? And this is where permissioning comes into play.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when it comes to product knowledge, our teams require much of the same product knowledge. It's more so in, you know, how like sales approach, conversational approach, methodologies can be very different. And again, there are just subtle differences with how we engage with that product knowledge. But
yeah, I think, Charles, you made a really interesting point too about sort of the speed of needing access to that knowledge. I imagine sales reps are on the phone or on Zoom and they need to answer questions really quickly. So the way that knowledge is formatted has to be sort of fast paced. But maybe if you're on the account management side, you have more of a relationship with this customer. Maybe you're, you know, talking over email or over a longer period of time. So that's really interesting in how you sort of format that knowledge.
That's exactly right.
Cool. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and move on to our second challenge in the perfect storm. Scaling quickly. Joe, tell us about this.
Yes. So again, I've been here, goodness, for 6 years this year and have seen the account management team scale pretty quickly. We can go to the next slide here, Rachel. I'll give you guys an example of this. So in 2014, that was when account management started. That was our birth year. I was actually, again, hired mid-year. I was account manager number 10. We hired, you know, several more people throughout the year, but that was when account management started at Square. In 2016, by the way, I became trainer. I did start as an account manager myself, and I was a team of 1 until the beginning of this year.
Wow.
By 2018, we had grown 5x, and by the year 2020, we had grown well over 10x. From when I started at Square. So that gives you some sense of how quickly account management scaled. I'll also add that sales scaled at the same rate. They're about twice our size.
The past two or 3 years have been ridiculous compared to the past 2 years before that. So just wanted to point that out, that it's crazy.
That's exactly right. Yes, the last 2 years have definitely been the majority of our growth. Rachel, if you want to take us to the next slide, I'll give you guys some more specific numbers on what this looked like. So, you know, you can see here, we have ebbs and flows in hiring. There are some quarters where I didn't have any new hires, and there were some quarters where I had a dozen. And so when I wasn't actually in the classroom training new hires, I really tried to put my project management hat on and figure out other ways where I could have impact. It's interesting. It's one of the things I think was a big blind spot for me, was understanding, goodness, oh my gosh, this is so project management related. Just be careful if you are starting to scale quickly to not take on, you know, for me, I take on no more than usually about 3 projects if I don't have a class. And usually 1, obviously it depends on the scale of the project, but typically 1, just to keep things, you know, essential and prioritized when I have a new hire class. Some examples of the things I would do when I don't have a, you know, an active cohort is like revamping content, of course. That's, again, in hypergrowth, there's always product content to update. Also, we've done knowledge-based audits. In 1 quarter, I launched our call coaching program. And so you can think about other ways that you can have impact when you're not in the classroom training. Also, don't forget about your managers. As your reps grow, your management team does too. I set up regular monthly syncs with them to make sure that I'm really engaging them and that they're part of the conversation. These folks are your customer, all right? Also, that was my biggest blind spot. Number 1 blind spot when I first started as trainer was stakeholder management. Always been a relationship manager at heart, but it's different when it's internal And so just don't overlook that. The more communication, the better. Clearly, geo spread, my goodness. That meant a ton of travel time for me, not now, but for my first several years as trainer. I was actually out of town for half of the first 6 weeks at the beginning of this year, because we had so many, different cohorts going on in different cities. On-site training is great. Like, everybody prefers it. Everybody loves a good instructor-led training, but don't lean on that too much. Think ahead of time as to what content, if it's purely informational, for example, can live asynchronously in a learning system or something of the sort. That said, I'm a huge fan of the cohort approach. The more folks you can hire at the same time to really share in that new experience, the more positive it's going to be for them. There's a lot of research behind that. Also, again, I was a team of one. And so be clear about your bandwidth, protect it ferociously, learn how to say no. All of these things that we really strive for are really important, especially if you're a really small team supporting training on your own. And then lastly, keep in mind, all of these things are happening things are happening in tandem with a growing product line. And so the challenge was exacerbated by that, is my point. And so if it's the case for you, again, scope creep is real. You never really know what may hit your desk when you're in the middle of 2 weeks of training. And so I'm a big fan of the book Essentialism. If anybody's ever read that, it really teaches us how to keep the main thing the main thing. My dad actually had that in his office when I was a kid. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. So
that's cute. I like that. Wow. So now that you are no longer a trainer and a team of one, I'd love to hear how has that changed your training process? What have you learned from those early days through this hyper growth and scale to today?
One of the smartest things we did was build a knowledge base. I cannot tell you how much duplication of effort and information there was. Charles said that already, but I'm just going to double click on that. And it gets harder the larger you get. I have used a runaway train analogy many times. Charles has heard it 10,000 times from me. It happens quickly. And so also keep in mind, as you scale, it's harder to gain that buy-in because you have to do it with more people.
Right.
And so the earlier on you can adopt some sort of knowledge base, even if it's just a really well-managed network of Google Docs to start, and make sure you have stakeholder buy-in, that is your single source of truth. It'll make it a lot easier on you. Also, start thinking about how you want your team to evolve. Learn how to plan strategically really early on. That'll keep you from feeling like you're spinning your wheels and you don't really know where you're going. That really goes hand in hand with stakeholder management. I don't know if any of you are familiar with trainingindustry.com. It's a little plug for them. I don't work for them, but I did take a strategic planning class for trainers, and that just helped me immensely. Oftentimes that work is really high up. So really learn how to think strategically early on.
Awesome. So you mentioned the importance of a knowledge base, and you've got here some things that you looked for in a knowledge solution or just in your own scaling strategy. So let's see what you've got for us here.
Yes. Learn how to delegate, guys. Learn how to delegate. I was not great at that when I started. I'm really good at that because I quickly learned how to I quickly learned how to expand my impact and my reach by delegating. I use the analogy, you're the conductor of the orchestra. You are not first chair in every section. You can't do everything, especially as your product line grows. On our team, and actually on the sales team too, we have what we call a DRI program. It's a term we borrowed from Apple. It stands for Directly Responsible Individual. And they are effectively product SMEs, so subject matter experts in a particular product area or industry vertical. And so that's really kind of helped us move much quicker in really leveraging them for their knowledge. Also think about like apprentices. somebody who's in your organization who may be more junior in their career that would like to eventually be a trainer or work in sales enablement. Those folks oftentimes will give you far, 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 far more than you anticipated. And lastly, like, don't let the good be the enemy of the perfect. My first lead when I became trainer said, the house isn't burning down. Build as you go. This is really a long tail game. As far as like scalability, I put on here micro learning. I really wish, now that we're in so many countries and we're hiring folks in like multiple time zones, it's quickly becoming impossible to have live, even online training in these markets, especially when the cohorts are really kind of up against each other, one after the other. And so I wish we did this earlier, so I'm telling you to do it now. Any informational content you can get in an on-demand format. Loom is a great tool for this. If you guys aren't familiar, you can record your face and show slides. Can be a good kind of stopgap. And then I want to say too, don't kill instructor-led training altogether. One thing we've done is hire folks, one behind the other in international markets so that they have a person when the second person joins. So it's something else to think about. And then again, when it comes to like scale and you're starting to get pretty big, I think ratio, you want to think about what your perfect ratio is. For us, it's about 1-75, both in sales and in account management. I would say, if it's a CS team, customer success, customer support, usually it's like 1-100, depending on the structure. And obviously every company is different, but as you're scaling that, think about how you can link growing your team to revenue opportunities and the things you can unlock with an additional head, and start communicating that really, really early on.
That's awesome. I really love the conductor versus first chair thing that you said, because I think especially as we scale, a lot of us are probably used to being the conductor, and then it's like learning that as you get more people, we're used to being the first chair and we want to be all the first chairs, and then learning that as you grow, the only way to scale is to kind of step into that conductor role instead. So I think that's really awesome. Charles, did you have any lessons that you've learned as you've scaled at Square that you wanted to share while we're here?
Yeah, I just wanted to think a little bit more about, and this is something we'll go into a little bit later on when it comes to runaway trains, especially when it comes to scaling. You need to set your foundations as early as possible in what that charter looks like, not just for the growth of your team, but the guidance to manage that team moving forward. So I'll speak on this a little bit later on, but we have a Guru Governance Council and also a Guru Governance layouts. My only wish is that we should have done that straight from the beginning. And Joe would know this as well. So I won't go too much into it because we'll talk about it a little bit later on. But you want to start thinking ahead of time. But it's not always just on you as well. I know we have some people here who are sales enablement managers. As Joe said, delegation and buy-in from various people across your organizations to build that with you creates buy-in. If they are part of the solution, they are part of the ongoing maintenance of it as well. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's cool, especially thinking, about the size Guru's at right now. And I'm sure we have audience members at different size organizations, but the things you say you wish you knew back then, I feel like that's kind of where we are now. So it's cool to like soak that in while we can before we scale, because one trainer to 75 sales reps is, kind of far out in the future for us still. So it's great to hear how you got where you are.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we've got our next challenge coming up.
Yes.
We switch slides. There we go. All right. Third challenge. I'm kind of overwhelmed by the first two, but let's hear what else you guys have got.
Let's crank it up a little bit more. So we talked about deep and wide knowledge. We talked about scaling really quickly. Now you're scaling globally is a whole new set of challenges. And so let's take a look at how Square grew just in the past, 3 years for the sales team, because when I was here, we didn't have any other international offices. So what you'll see here is we started off with San Francisco. We started off then St. Louis, New York, and then we started with UK all of a sudden, Canada, Melbourne, Japan now. And so it is all over the place. And the reason why I say that is, if we can go to the next slide, Rachel, is we want to kind of think about what are the challenges that come with it. So first, I'm going to keep going back to this, which is shared and unique information. How this changes when it comes to international and global expansion is that now you're thinking about localization. And when you have localization, 90% of the products that you're going to be selling in an international market is going to have the same functionalities. It is up to you to understand what is that 10% that is going to be different, and then reapply that thought of roles and permissioning for that, right? Mm-hmm. Because that 10% is going to change another 10% for UK, for Canada, for Australia and Japan, or whatever you guys have. So you want to think about it that way. So how do you make sure that they have access to the existing content that you have? Again, that 90%. And also call out the differences in terms of doing it in a way where you can have them filter out. So one way that we really do this well is, well, not well, but we're learning to do it, is tagging, right? So for UK, we tag something that is specific for them. Also, if you have external materials, making sure that there are not necessarily different cards, but very clear formats that show you, okay, US is the first one, Canada is the second, Australia is third, UK, etc., of how you want to do it. Because you want to train people to look at your content in a way that is easiest for them. Definitely. So I won't go into it too much, but with Square for Restaurants, we started to, oh, sorry, Rachel, if you can go back one more. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's my fault, totally, because I was talking about tagging. But with Square for Restaurants, right, this goes into the next one as well, which is launch timelines defer. So if you have different markets, how are you going to, as Joe said, keep the main thing the main thing? If there is a launch that's coming out for another market and the second one won't be doing for another 2 months, let's think about what, again, is the design of creating an international article or card that is permissioned for that specific market, right? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of like my mind is going crazy just thinking about it now.
It's dizzying.
It's so dizzying. But to make it less dizzy, you need to identify the subject matter experts differing by region, and you need to identify a specific product manager, product marketing manager, their head of sales to get their buy-in to say, hey, this is the launch that's going on for your country. I need your buy-in to be part of updating this content, because without it, our salespeople cannot sell your product. And there's nothing like a threat for someone's product not be sold by a salesperson. I'm usually not for threats, but let's work a little bit here and there.
That sounds effective, yeah.
Right? Like,
it does.
If you don't want us to sell it, cool. Then don't give us information. That's it. I don't condone this, but it has worked for me. So yeah, understand each one of your different regions. And this might not be, internationally as well. If you have regions within the US and there's differing cultures or differing, let's say CS folks, right? Where they have different ways, for example, time, what are the processes that they have in terms of escalation if the escalations is in a different time zone?
Yeah.
Or let's say different escalations for if you have overnight reps. I was a CS person in a past life. So like, how does that escalate when no one else is awake and those are your managers, right? So think about those are another challenges when it comes to growth. Again, permissioning, different roles, and then keeping the main thing. And then finally, finding subject matter experts. So let's talk about very specific ways that they did that. So Rachel, if you can go to the next slide. One way that we want you to kind of look out for in a solution, of course, is card tagging. It's been very helpful without sacrificing duplication to show that. Flexible architecture as well, meaning that it needs to be able to surface both the shared cards and the unique geography information. We talked about that a bunch already. And flexible formatting is the one that you want to think about here that's a little different. What that means is that you want to think about the cards and the template in a way that is consistent across different shared cards. The reason for that is you need to delineate the different information by keeping the shared information at the top. Towards the bottom, you say, okay, UK, these are the things that you need to know that are different. Canada, these are the things that you know that are different. But we know for the most part that most of the shared information is the same. 90% at the top, 10% at the bottom. Make sure that it's consistent across all of your cards or articles.
Right.
One way to do
thinking
that.
About that.
Sorry, go ahead, Cameron.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, thinking about that 10%. I think when we met to talk about this before, we talked about like the cultural differences, or you guys deal in fintech, so there's different currencies that you have to like account for these different countries. I think that's something that I can't relate to yet, as Guru's only in the US, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of that 10% and like the things you guys have to think about for all these different markets.
Yeah, I'll give you an example actually. So one of the big challenges in global growth for us was to Japan, for example. Again, being a fintech company, Square powers the exchange of money for goods and services, right? I mean, that's our core flagship product, right? Mm-hmm. That differs from country to country quite a bit, right? And especially in Japan, for example. There are different payment types in Japan. There's something called e-money. Mm-hmm. There are, and again, even culturally, the way that you interact with money, or how people, manage their money and how they spend their money, credit card versus cash. I mean, it's all over the place depending on the country that you're in. It differs obviously globally immensely, and so that's just kind of one kind of catalytic factor in that, your product, even though it may differ country to country, those customers also interact with it differently.
Exactly. And going in a non-material way for that, it is cultural as well. So for sales teams, you're going to want to think about, okay, are the objection responses going to be the same? Probably not between the US and Japan.
What are you saying?
Yeah, same thing with your CS teams, right? Are the responses going to be the same? Is there a different sort of timeline that they expect in a different country versus yours? So think about it that way as well. And this is where the subject matter experts by region really help out, because you as one person probably will not know 7 different regions and in terms of what they find acceptable and not acceptable. So you want someone to be the contributor to create that card, and also the reviewer who will continue to verify that card for accuracy.
That's awesome. So I'm wondering, given all of this attention to localization and globalization, how has that helped you guys transition recently into this remote first world? Do you think you were better off having, already sort of started to think about figuring this out, or how has that sort of played into this remote first world?
We definitely, Square, we have always had remote workers to some extent, not always, but in recent years. I'd actually answer that. I think it's kind of the other way around, Jan. Like, I think we were already enabled and had the tooling to work from wherever, basically, depending on what your role is. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that that has propelled our global growth in some ways, because now we all have to work from home, right? So the working here, the remote work has kind of propelled our global growth, rather than the other way around. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think, Charles?
What I would say is completely 100%. However, I think it's really important to call out what made Square ready for that. And so these are some things that you want to think about for your company as well. One of the ways that we approach this for the sales team is how we've created much more effective closeness with our teams that are now working from home is Streamline Communication. And one way we do that is to have a newsletter for all of these different updates in one place. In that newsletter are all the guru cards that are in there, right? You want these places to be centralized in terms of communication so that everyone references the same thing, but also when they reference that, it makes it even more accessible. So that's one way that we've made it easier. When we went internationally, now this one is going to be really tough. You want to make sure, again, that there is actually internationally something that we're figuring out. I'm going to be honest, internationally, something we're still figuring out. But I will say, thinking about your lines of communication, how you centralize everything, and how you make your knowledge pervasive across all of those to have one ongoing reference is going to bring your teams much closer and more consistent in their effectiveness and efficiency across the board.
Definitely.
I'll go with that. That sounded like a good answer.
That really did. And I think furthermore, so you two, I know, work together pretty closely, but have always been in separate offices, and you enable different teams. So how do you guys kind of stay in lockstep in terms of, communication, staying in touch, staying on the same page? How does that work?
So we actually used to be in the same office. I'm in St. Louis now, but we did both work in San Francisco.
Right.
And to be clear,
you're traveling all the time, so might as well.
To be clear, I want to say account management and sales are completely different organizations. We both report into the same executive, but our leadership, other than that one executive, is completely separate. So I think proactive, like the more communication, the better. I think what has actually brought my, account management, training, enablement, whatever you want to call us, and Charles's team together the most is our knowledge base, is Guru, because we do share a lot of that knowledge. And so we have kind of we both have a vested interest in maintaining that and ensuring that it works well. Aside from that, we do have other tactical things. We have a monthly trainer sync actually for all trainers at Square, and a Slack channel for all of us. And I also meet with Charles's boss almost weekly at this point on various projects. So, cross-pollinate, folks. The more you can work with other people, we've kind of said this a couple of times, that have similar roles with you on project, the quicker you'll get through that work, and also it'll have far more impact. You want to add that, Charles?
Yeah, no, completely agree.
That's awesome. All right, why don't we only have about 9 minutes left, so why don't we turn it over to Q&A. I've got a bunch more questions, but I'll share. So if anybody has any questions they want to ask of Charles and Joe, go ahead and put those in the chat. And while people start typing, I kind of would love to go back to how you said that Guru helps bring your two teams together. And I'd love to hear a little bit. You've talked to us about, the different things you've looked for in a knowledge base and how you use that. I'd love to hear maybe sort of like the far other end of that. Like, what would your training and onboarding and enablement efforts look like without Guru?
Being a shambles. One of the neat things I think, and Charles, you can add to this, one of the neat things I think that a knowledge base has brought us is a litmus test for need to know for onboarding. So if there was something I need to train somebody on as a new hire and it does not exist in Guru, it really just doesn't exist. It forces your leadership and your subject matter experts to contribute to the knowledge base when you're hiring new talent, because you have no source of truth unless it's in Guru, right? And so, I'd say that's a big thing. You want to add to that, Charles?
Asking that question is like asking like an adult, like, what was life before you were born?
Just can't imagine it.
Or it's like something that you want to like forget. And so, definitely. Without it, I think the various sources that we have, especially how Square operates with different teams, especially those who contribute information, it would probably take us 10 times more time to just find one piece. And when it comes to sales, that is absolutely not forgivable, because the amount of time that we have is so precious, and that that time equals money.
And that's exacerbated also by a longer ramp time. So, which is even less money, right?
Yeah.
So less money they're making, so to speak. Yeah. David asked a question too. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, let's read it. So how have you driven adoption of Guru, and were there any special tips, tricks for account management and sales teams? That's a good one.
So I can talk about the adoption, Charles, and then you can maybe talk about our audit. Sure. Make sure you have your information architecture on point. Don't be careless about how you're architecting your Guru instance. This is something we did do and took us months to fix. I'm not exaggerating, months to fix. And so think about those buckets of your knowledge and ensure that someone is consistently updating it. One of the things we implemented, and then I'll give it to Charles to talk more about the audit that we had to do because our instance had gotten so out of control, was create a request process that touches people who know how to format content, and know how to organize it in our existing instance. That, again, that runaway train doesn't get ahead of us. But the more you can be organized, the better. What do you want to add to that, Charles?
Yeah, talking about that audit, if you are someone who already has a very mature knowledge base that you have a lot of information on, audit, right? And what that audit means is take a look at the architecture, like Joe said. Take a look at your roles and permissioning. Understand which pieces of information are shared and which ones are unique. Put permissions on those because that is going to help people find information faster. If they can't find information, they will not adopt it. Second to that, you need to socialize that. So you need to be telling people, hey, we made these updates, give it another try. Hopefully that will make it better for you. Get consistent feedback on whether it's working or not. And then what I would say is if you're thinking about adoption in the earlier stages, right? You're just starting your internal knowledge base. Get contributors. Get people on your sales team and account management teams to be in charge. So whether that's your subject matter experts, whether that's your DRIs, get buy-in from them and call out their positive work, right? So when it comes to our teams, whenever we create a card in our sales team meetings, I always say, hey, thank you so much for this person, whether that's a salesperson or a product marketing manager, for being an enablement champion for creating these cards. The last thing I'll add.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And then,
I was just going to say, like, David, it has to be your source of truth.
Yeah.
And that's a big stakeholder management thing. There's still somewhat pushback. People want to live in Google Docs all the time, especially leadership who aren't using it for product knowledge all the time. On the phone every day. It's not nearly as much a challenge for our teams to, for our frontline reps to use it as it is for, adoption on management. You got to kind of keep reminding them. But, it's, the strategy for us has been like, because we have Guru, we know what we know, and that is our source of truth. If it's not in Guru, again, it doesn't exist, right?
And then
what we can add,
the very last thing is make sure that Guru is pervasive in all of your communication, especially when it comes to product updates or any sort of communication to your team. The reason you want to be linking Guru cards in those is it allows you to say everything is the source. This is the source of truth. And so when you do that for every piece of communication, it is bueno. And Allison, with your living in Google Docs, we'll talk about that later because there's a fix for that. There's a fix for that. So David, just to give you some numbers, when we did this audit and we started implementing these things, we went from like a 60% adoption rate to almost an 85 to 90% adoption rate going up and down, but we've maintained it that way. So that's a significant increase in adoption.
For sure.
And then we've also, because of that adoption, we've also increased the amount of verification score we have. It can be better. I will say that. It can be a lot better.
Can always be better.
I will work on that in the next months or so. But just to give you proof that it works, that's how we've experienced it.
Yeah, I think that sense of ownership.
Also asked a question too, by the way.
Yeah.
I know we're getting at time, so I want to make sure that we answer that one.
Yeah, let's have this be our last question maybe. So you guys just talked about getting like adoption and excitement in your own teams, but how do you grow that adoption outside of your organization. So sales, account management, she mentioned specifically her product team that she would love to have more involved with sharing knowledge with her sales team. What do you guys think about that?
You know, it's interesting, early on when we adopted, there were kind of mixed feelings, I think, among our product team and product marketing team as to who should own that information. That has changed now. Our product marketing team wants their hands and their feet in our Guru instance to make sure that they, you know, our teams have accurate information. So Allison, I would think first about who on your product team is most vested in your CE department having accurate information. Typically that's revenue generating teams. So our teams that the products that we sell the most on our sales and account management team are typically the most involved in our Guru instance and want to be.
Yeah. There are two things that I can say in regards to that. One, make it a consistent request and ask for any of your product launches forever and ever, right? So what that means is that we're, especially with Square, when we have product launches like every 6 months, basically, we always say, is there a Guru card for that? This is the list of enablement materials that we need from you in order for us to sell your product. Please provide these at least 2 weeks before this launch.
And you'll sound like a broken record, and it takes time to get institutionalized, but it does happen.
Yeah. And it saves the SMEs time down the road. If they don't have to answer the same repeat questions, they're going to want that info. That's
exactly right.
In Guru.
That's exactly right.
The last thing that I will say, because this is extremely important, is create relationships with new people joining your team, because it is up to you to work with their leads to make it a foundational task as they move forward with any projects they have. So you want it as an expectation for anyone that's new coming in, working with their leads and their buy-in for that. That's been extremely helpful on our end to be like, cool, it's automatic now. I don't even need to ask anymore. Just be like, here's the list, please create.
That's awesome. Wow. All right. We are just at 3 o'clock, so that is time, but this is a great conversation. I'd love to keep it going in the Guru community. So there's a link there for everybody to join the Slack community. Charles and Joe are both in there. If you want to ask them any questions, I'm in there too. So be sure to join and say hi when you get there, and let's keep chatting. Before we go, there are just a few more Remote-a-thon sessions coming up. It's every Thursday all summer. So these 4 listed are the next sales enablement sessions. So go ahead and get your seats for those. And with that, I'll just thank you, Charles and Joe, for spending this time with us. This was such an awesome conversation. I loved having you guys here.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure's all ours.
Yeah, and thank you.
Go forth and weather that storm, folks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yeah, be well, everybody. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.